Now, Jerry in his speech acknowledged the Honourable Vaughan Johnson, who is here today to open the conference, and I'd like to welcome Vaughan here. Vaughan's got opinions on the way the basin should be run, and I think he's looked down at the Murray-Darling Basin and seen how that's been misrun, and I think he might have some messages for us. So, Vaughan, we're extremely grateful that you've put aside your time to come to speak to the group here today about this issue, which is contentious at the moment, and we welcome you and look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Terry. I also recognise Angus Ammett and Richard and the other conveners of this meeting of the Lake Eyre Basin under the spotlight. I do want to recognise here this afternoon our Indigenous brothers and sisters. As Jerry, thank you for that welcome to country. And I also want to recognise here David Brooke, a former Mayor of the Diamantina Shire, and Bruce Scott, a former Mayor of the Barcoo Shire, and other interested bodies and guests, friends, one and all. Thank you very much, Angus, for the invitation going back a couple of months ago to be do the official opening here at this conference. I was talking with my federal colleague Bruce Scott this morning, the member for Maranoa, and he asked that he pass on to his apologies that he can't be here. He had a previous obligation on the other end of his electorate. As you can imagine, now Maranoa is a huge hunk of country which takes in most of the Lake Eyre catchment in Queensland anyway. And also my colleague Howard Hobbs, a member for Warrego, will be here later this evening and will be here for the duration of tomorrow and Wednesday. My father had a saying, "You've got to be cruel to be kind. Sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind." My dad was a very quiet, unassuming man, never said much, but by God, when he said it, you took notice of his words. And coming out of the backcountry myself, I've lived all my life at Quilpie, and I was born on the Darling River at Burke in New South Wales, way back in 1947, so that makes me an old bugger compared to some here. But the point I make is, we know what's happened to the Darling system in New South Wales. We know what's happened to a lot of other systems in Australia. And with the former state government going back a couple of years ago, they made reference to the wild rivers of the far north. And when you talk about the wild rivers of the far north, there's no comparison whatsoever to our western river systems being terminated wild rivers. Yes, they're wild rivers because they're located in a harsh environment in far western, northwestern Queensland, where it rains sometimes but not real often. And it's a very, very important part of our, well, today, our organic meat industry, our beef industry, our tourism industry, our ecotourism industry. So it's so vitally important that that sacred piece of land not be included as a wild river as such, like the northern streams, but a wild river on its own. And I believe that me now, as a member of the government in Queensland, I have a right to say how I see this country should be represented as far as that goes. And I said on ABC radio this morning with Chrissy Arthur at 11 o'clock, I'm opposed to the operation of farming or cropping on the Lake Eyre Basin, and for the reasons that I'll highlight directly. And I like to always quote the Cree Indian prophecy. And the Cree Indians in America had a saying, "Only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been poisoned, only after the last fish has been eaten, only then will we realise that money cannot be eaten." And I think that's pretty much applicable to what we are here about today. And I've got to say to you, Angus, thank you very, very much for the invitation to come along here, because like a lot of you here, I'm very, very passionate about this part of Queensland, about the industries that's gone before us and the industries that'll come after us. So as a Western Queenslander, as I say, I've lived all my life at Quilpie. I might have been born over the border, but I've lived all my life at Quilpie till I came here in 1989 when I was blessed to be the representative of the wonderful people in this great electorate of Gregory. And I say here today, it's about promotion, it's about development, I know, but in more ways where technology is going to advance what we're about. This is a very fragile system. It's a system, ladies and gentlemen, that is, while it's fragile, it's resilient, but we are resilient too. But we are living in a land where we don't see good rainfall, and I know from down at Quilpie where I come from and the people down around Windora and the Brook family out of Burrsville and the people further out. My old man used to always say, you can tell the good seasons. I can tell you all the good seasons too. 63, 56, 63, 72, 74, a couple in the 80s, and forget the bloody rest, because they were damn dry, I'll tell you. But anyway, the real fact of the matter is, this is about us getting it right. In this electorate of Gregory, I've got to say, it covers just under 400,000 square kilometres of Queensland. It's a very diverse piece of Queensland. We've got the Western River system in the west, the outback tourism. We've got the sheep and wool industry here in the central west, coupled to the cattle industry. We have the grain and coal and mineral industry back into the east. And currently I'm fighting two fights on two fronts at the moment. The other one is about strategic cropping land in the Golden Triangle just south of Emerald, where I was last week with Minister Cripps. I've told them in no uncertain terms it'll be over my dead body we'll see coal mining in that part of Queensland. It is the best country in probably the world as far as growing goes. It's that black alluvial volcanic soil where they don't make it anymore, and if you read some of my material in the Parliament, you'll see where I said if you plant a feather it'll grow a chook. That's how good it is. And you know, for future generations we've got to make absolutely certain, ladies and gentlemen, we preserve the environment as it is, improve the environment as it is for the future generations. And there's some young people in this room here today who are very well educated, have a vision themselves, and I believe if we, as to use Jerry's words, the custodian, the original custodians of the land, if we are not going to be realistic in looking after the land that is today, the way black before us and white today and joint black and white today, those peoples, I think we've done a pretty good job. Very harsh land the last 150 years, and I think we've done it pretty fairly. You know, it's a resilient land, as I say, but we learn to destock it when it's bad. We run the necessary numbers when it's right. And I always quote one former grazier from down around Windora. He said, it's better to sell them than to smell them. And that's exactly how we run our operations. And at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, there's another comparison I want to draw you to, and that's a comparison in Africa. And I'm not one for writing speeches, but I want to quote this. And it's in relation to the Nile Delta. The construction of the Aswan Dam dramatically altered the character of the Nile in Egypt. Lake Nasser, which was produced by the dam, submerged the second cataract and turned the southern section of the river in Egypt into a 300-mile long reservoir. The dam brought an end to the annual floods, but it also robbed the land of the fertile silt deposited on the farmland each year by the floods. Isn't this something we're talking about here? Precipitation is generally scarce in most of Egypt, and it occurs and tends to fall between November and March. Again, something similar to what we're about, with January, February generally being the rainiest months. Moisture is generally carried in by the winds from the Mediterranean Sea. Very little rain comes in from the Red Sea. Egypt's mountains are situated in places where they don't cause much of rain-making effect. As a result, the rainfall amounts are considerably lower than other parts of Israel, Lebanon and Iran. The prevailing winds generally blow from the north to the south, with rainfall amounts generally decreasing as one moves southward. Northern Egypt receives the same amount of rain as southern Italy. Alexandria gets about 75 inches or 190 centimetres of rain a year. Cairo gets about 15 inches or 40 centimetres. And the barren deserts in the south, east and west get between nothing and 5 inches. Can we relate to that? I think we can. The Red Sea areas receive little rain but are oppressively humid and hot. In the desert regions, rainfall can be vary greatly from month to month and from year to year. Egypt doesn't suffer as much as other places during droughts because its water comes from the Nile and the oasis along it. I've got to say to you here today, ladies and gentlemen, this Lake Eyre catchment system is not a Nile. It's a delta though. And the natural wonder, it's one of the iconic natural wonders of the world. And I believe today, if anyone wants to interfere with that, and I know my colleague, the Minister for Mines and Natural Resources, put it out for discussion to see what's the best way forward. We've been having this debate here for 20 years, I've got to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, and I've opposed it for 20 years. I've stood up for it for 20 years, and I can see people in this forum here this afternoon who oppose it too. And you might think that it should be an open debate in relation to how people think. Well, I've got to be honest with you, and I've got to tell you how I think, because I'm not one for hiding things, and I think you need to know the facts, how I see it. And I said this morning on ABC Radio, as the free individual of Western Queenslander Vaughan Johnson, I oppose it for the reasons. I've seen some prolonged droughts in this country. I've seen some hard times, low commodity prices, and what you've got to remember, we are price takers in this country, not price makers. We don't find our markets easily. We're in the southern hemisphere, a long way from markets of the northern hemisphere where the population is, and I know we've got people in this room also who have been pursuing other markets across the globe for the betterment of their own operations, and because of their pursuit of those types of operations, somebody else has benefited from it. And I think that's what we're about in growing our markets, whether it's tourism, whether it's the beef industry, the wool industry, the mineral industry, or whatever it is. We are great competitors here in Australia, and we are very lucky to have the country we've got. So let's look after it. Another issue I just want to touch on very quickly is the CSG, coal seam gas in the Artesian Basin. That's something that worried me for a long, long time. It's something that's been under the spotlight of many people. Big business, I know, there's a lot of them extracting that coal seam gas out of the wells back in the eastern side and further in. And I know there's anomalies there. Any of you that would have seen that the foreign correspondent report on ABC Radio a little while ago, hosted by Michael Brissenden, where they've closed a lot of it down in the United States because they can't get the mix right in relation to the fracking and the extraction of water away from the gas, or the gas away from the water. This country out here, and people like myself, I would be misrepresenting my country and my people if I didn't say to the players in the southeast and the players wider afield that if we shut down the Artesian Basin, we'll shut down the lot. And it's so vitally, vitally important, ladies and gentlemen, that we all recognise the importance of that underground water as much as we don't underestimate the importance of the bit of water we get on top. I've got to say to you, Terry, you said there's a couple of vacancies on the boat tonight, mate. Well, I suggest you might go on the boat. If some other people get their way, there'll be no water left in the bloody water hole. But we will make sure the water stays there. And the other thing I do want to say, I must be out of time, am I?
Oh, I'm getting close.
And the other thing I want to say to you,
You told me you'd be a problem, though.
my good friend Peter Douglas. I know Peter can't be here today, and it's people like Peter Douglas and Bob Morris. I see my good mate Bob there, and who had the guts to stand up and be counted on issues like this, like you two, Angus. And it's people like this. They can criticise us from time to time, but the most important thing is that we also recognise that this is not about us, it's about our kids and their kids. And before I sign off, as Peter Douglas, Peter, the reason why he's not here today, he bought Myra a new crowbar and shovel for Christmas. And he's gone away for a couple of days to let her get used to using it. So he didn't want to be there to embarrass her, or she embarrass him, but that's what Peter Douglas is like. She's a great girl, that Myra. There's a lot of great girls like that out there, and it's the women, and there's a lot of them here in this forum today, that make it great. And I say to all the ladies, thanks for your grit and determination, the way you stand up for what is so right. The other thing, if I can just say, this is a great opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, for us to once and all to shut down any controversy at all over this most iconic, most sensitive, most fragile river system in the world. It's not the Amazon, it's not the Nile, it is the Cooper catchment. It's one that is so important, vitally important to all of us, one for the last 150 years that I think we've treated with utmost respect. And there's people here that have lived on that river system and their families for generations before, and I know it'll be for generations after. Please listen to what the players and the presenters have got to say over the course of the next 2.5 days, or 1.5 days from now. And I wish you well in your deliberations, but I just want to put it on record here today. You know where I stand, and I think it's important you know where I stand as a private individual and also as a member of a government. And I've stressed that with my colleague, the Minister, and I've also explained some of it to the Premier. And whilst we talk about wild rivers, the other part of it that a lot of people don't understand are the HPAs, the high preservation areas, where, you know, I was talking to a producer this morning, and down the bottom end, where the floods have been the last couple of years, those outside water holes are drying up, and they've got to move cattle. And with HPAs, you can't put dams in there for that prime reason. This is where it's so damn ridiculous, because we've got people drawing up policies who have no understanding whatsoever of this country in question, and they don't seem to want to ask anybody. But I say to you, the professional people, we have got to get the science right. I think we've got the science right. And I say to each and every one of you here today, be vocal, stand up for what we believe is right, and that's the protection of this system. Before I close off, I just want to recognise one other person here who has come along here today, the former Mayor of the Winton Shire, my good friend Ed Warren. Great to see you here, Ed. Ed's now the chairman of the Central West Health Board and doing an exemplary job. And it's people like these people that give their time that do make a difference. To you, Angus, and to your conveners, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here this afternoon. I hope common sense is going to prevail, because you can rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, you know where I stand. I officially declare this forum open. Thank you, and God bless you all.